Lesson 7.7, Analyze Linear Equations, y equals mx. Your I can statement for today says, I can write equations to describe linear relationships. In this lesson, we're going to extend our knowledge of slope and how we calculate slope in order to now describe a situation using a linear equation. Example 1. Relate constant of proportionality to slope. The students in Meg's class are building a fence around the class garden. How can they use the pricing for the different lengths of fencing to determine the cost for 50 feet of fencing? The first thing we need to do is look for the relationship between the length of fencing and the cost. You see a picture here with 3 examples. In each example, they tell us how many feet were purchased and the price for that many feet. What is the cost for just 1 foot of fencing? Step 1. Write the length and cost as ordered pairs and graph the ordered pairs to find the rise and run using any 2 of those ordered pairs. Since this is a proportional relationship, you can find the constant of proportionality, or the unit rate, and that will be the same as the slope. However, by looking at step 1, you can see that they have graphed 4 ordered pairs related to the problem. They connected the line between those ordered pairs and created the rise and run numbers between each ordered pair set. In step 2, they analyzed those triangles that are created by drawing the rise and the run. For any of those ordered pairs, the slope is what we call m, and it is a constant number. So y divided by x is equal to m, or y equals m times x. Now this might be familiar to you because that y divided by x number is what we called k back in our previous topic, and that would have been topic 3. And our equation that we wrote back in topic 3, okay, so this is topic 3 work, was y equals kx, where k is that constant of proportionality. Well, the only difference now is once we have a proportional relationship, and we know it's proportional, that k value is our slope, and we call that m. Okay? So the slope is called m, and we just replace the k in our equation with that. So once we know the slope of that line and where those ordered pairs run through, we can substitute that slope into the equation y equals mx in order to find a linear explanation for that relationship. In this case, each foot of fencing costs $5. So 5 times x, which is the length of the fencing, will tell us the total cost in dollars, and that is your y number. So if Meg's class wants to know the cost of 50 feet of fencing, they would substitute in 50 for x and multiply that by the $5 per foot to get that y equals $250 for the fencing. Now go down to the bottom of the page and take a look at the try it problem. For the try it problem, in order to write an equation, we need to know the slope of the line. The graph shows us the distance traveled per gallon of gasoline. The point that is identified on the graph first is the point 480. But we need to have a second point on that graph in order to calculate slope. In this case, looking down here at my try it problem, I noticed that they gave me the 3 that they were subtracting. So that 3 must be the x coordinate, and I need the y coordinate that goes with it, which is 60. So the 2 ordered pairs that we're using are 480 and 360. And then we find the slope between them by subtracting the y's and subtracting the x's and simplifying. In this case, 80 take away 60 is 20, and 4 take away 3 is 1. So the slope of our line is 20 over 1, or just 20. Then we put that back into our equation, y equals mx. In this case, the m is 20. So the equation that describes that graph is y equals 20x. Now take a look at the convince me. How do the equations y equals mx and y equals kx compare? Remember that m and k, in this case, represent the same thing. M is the label that we use to describe the slope of any line. K, however, is the slope of a line in a proportional relationship. So K is a special kind of slope. Example 2. A drone descends into a mining cave. The graph relates its distance below ground to time. Write an equation that describes the relationship. Step 1 is to find the slope of the line. Again, we do that by subtracting our y-coordinates and subtracting our x-coordinates. So you need to identify first 2 points on the line. In this case, the 2 points that they have selected are 3, -750, and 2, -500. Finding the slope means subtracting -750 take away -500, and then subtracting 3 take away 2. So the slope is -250. What does that mean? It means the drone descends 250 meters per second. Now, how do I know that that's a descent going down and not an ascent going up? Well, look over here at the generalize. Lines that slant upward from left to right have a positive slope. So that would mean lines that go like this have a positive slope. Lines that slant downward from left to right have a negative slope. So if the line is moving up and away from the origin, it has a positive slope, and if it's moving down and away, right or left to right, it has a negative slope. Okay? You're going to want to remember that. So you might want to make a note to yourself and circle star that. All right, going on to step 2, we now need to write the equation of the line. Since the equation will be in the form y equals mx, we simply substitute the slope for the letter m in the equation. So the equation of the line describing the drone's distance over time is y equals -250x. Now let's look at example 3. In this example, we're going to learn to graph an equation that has the form y equals mx. A recipe for trail mix calls for 1 cup of raisins for every 2 cups of granola. Write an equation that describes the relationship between raisins and granola. Graph the line. So in this problem, we're going to actually do 2 things. We know that there is a ratio of raisins and granola. In this case, the granola is our x number. So the granola is going to be our x value, and the raisins are going to be our y value. So when we find the slope of the line, we're going to describe that, remember, as a y to x ratio. And the raisins is 1, whereas the granola is 2, okay? So our ratio of raisins to granola is a 1-to-2 ratio. Because we found the slope of the line here, that's our m, okay? We're going to substitute that into the equation in place of m. So our equation is y equals 1/2 x. There we go. All right. Step 2 is to graph that on the grid that you see over here on the right side, the trail mix recipe. Okay, and what you might notice is that this is what we would call a proportional relationship. And I know that because the amount of granola changes with the amount of raisins, and the amount of raisins changes depending on how much granola is in there. So because it tells us that every 1 cup of raisins gives us 2 cups of granola, then that means our slope of 1/2 tells us to go up 1 and over 2. So we can start at the point 0, 0, the origin, okay? And we can go up 1 and over 2 and get a second point. Now, this point right here can be described using the raisins and granola ratio that they gave us in the problem. But then we can also use that to find other ratios. For example, if I have 4 cups of granola, then that must mean that I have used 2 cups of raisins. Now, I can connect those dots and those points to create the line. So I have 3 points there to connect. Now take a look at the try it. At the bottom of the page, A for the try it goes with example 2. And B goes with example 3. See if you can solve try its A and B and come back and check your answers when you're finished. For try it part A, you need to select 2 points that fall on the grid line. 0, 0, or the origin, is always one of those options when it goes through where the X and Y axis connect. The other point that you might choose to pick is the point 25, 10. Notice that the grid lines count by 5s, so when you're picking that line, it's at the point 25 on the x-axis and 10 on the y-axis. Then you're going to use that to find the slope of the line by subtracting, and you get 10 25ths, which simplifies to 2/5. So the slope of the line is 2/5. When you use that in your equation, in order to write your equation of that line, you substitute in the 2/5 in place of m. So y equals mx becomes y equals 2/5 x. And that is the equation of the line. In try it B, you're doing that like example 3, you notice that you have a negative number for slope. Since this is a proportional relationship, okay, y equals mx or y equals kx, okay, you can use 0, 0 as one of your ordered pairs to create the line. Next, you're going to use the slope, and the slope is -3, which means -3 over 1, where -3 is the y number and 1 is the x number. Now, don't forget what that means. It tells us that we're going to be moving up or down the -3 and then side to side 1 as our slope goes from that ordered pair. So from the ordered pair 0, 0, from my origin, I'm going to go down 3 and over 1. But the problem is that the grid lines still continue to count by 5s. So how might I change that slope to get an equivalent fraction or an equivalent slope that would tell me how to move on the grid lines? Since slope can be described using a ratio, then you can change that ratio just like you would change equal fractions. So a slope of -3 over 1 would be equivalent to a slope of -15 over 5. So in this case, we can still move up or down the -15 and then move side to side the +5. So in this case, when we start at 0, 0, we're going to be moving down because the number is a -15. We're going to be moving down 15. So 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to be moving to the right 5. So here's my second point. I can do that again if I need to, or if I've got space on my graph, or I can simply connect the 2 points that I'm given, and I can connect those to make my line. That line's terrible. Let me try that again. Hang on a second. All right, let's go back. There's my 0, 0. There's that point. Sorry, my stylus is, there we go, not cooperating very well. So there's the graph of the line that represents the slope -3.